Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Designing Your Life Live. Today is a super special VIP announcement that I had to come over actually to Bill's home and potential writing nest to deliver because it is such a big deal. We're super excited to tell you this, and actually this announcement today is truly a testament to our community. And without you and your support and your excitement and the stories that you share with us, we really wouldn't be able to share this moment with you today. So without further ado, for the very big moment, Bill Burnett, #1 New York Times bestselling author, the man himself, here to deliver the message.
Well, that's pretty big deal. Let's just go back a little bit in time. This journey started. The journey started 10 years ago when Dave came over from Berkeley and said, "Hey, you want to teach a class at Stanford on using design thinking for kids who are trying to figure out what to do with their college careers?" And that turned into classes and a bunch of things. And in 2014, I said, "Dave, we got to write a book." And he says, "No, I don't want to write a book." And in 2015, I finally got him to agree to write it. And the book came out in September of 2016. And it's been just an extraordinarily amazing journey for us. You know, I'd never written a book. I didn't think I ever would do so. I'm kind of a designer, maker of things, not a writer.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know you never thought you'd write.
Never. But I really enjoyed the process. Dave got through it. Okay, he's not a happy writer. But we put the thing together with our fantastic team, including our agent, Doug Abrams, and a fantastic developmental writer who really showed us how to write good books, a woman named Laura Love. And the book came out, and we were lucky to be on the New York Times bestseller list for a while. And we've been bopping around, on Amazon at one point we were #2. We were ahead of Harry Potter and Bruce Springsteen. That lasted about 15 minutes, but mostly we've been bopping around between 100 and 500, or no more than 1,000 on the Amazon list. And so that's really exciting. It just means that lots and lots of people have found the book to be useful. And Dave and I went on literally a world tour, starting in London and all over the United States, to help promote the book. Also courtesy of our publisher and the fantastic Stanford Alumni Association, who gets a shout out for sending us to 14 cities. In any case,
so I'm gonna stop you right there.
Yeah.
Any highlights from the road? Any surprises? Places you loved?
Well, it's interesting because someone says go here and do a talk, and for the most part it was talks to various alumni clubs. Actually the couple of hats. The very first one we did was in New York City, because that's where our publisher was, and they brought us back for some work, for some book stuff. And Stanford has a big alumni group in New York City, of course. And so we went to the, I think it was the Hyatt Regency, it was the Marriott right off of Times Square. And there's 600 people in this giant ballroom, one of these hotel ballrooms.
Sounds pretty fancy.
And we're doing our little 90-minute mini workshop, and where we do a really quick Odyssey plan, and sitting right down front on the very first, round table of 8 people, is a young woman from the class of 1953, I think. She was 84 years old.
Wow.
We'll call her Ruth. And all dressed up.
An early female grad, too.
Yeah, just looking great, sitting at the front table, chatting with everybody. When we get to the Odyssey plans, where we hand out a piece of paper that says, "Here's 3 plans," and you do your 3 plans. You folks are all familiar with this. She raises her hand, and we said, if anybody's stuck, raise your hand. Her hand goes right up, and Dave goes over thinking, well, she's 84. What kind of Odyssey?
Where's this going?
Where's this going? She doesn't have any.
I wouldn't have any idea.
And she goes, "Young man," I'm talking to Dave, "I have 7 things I have on my list of things to do yet. I need another piece of paper, please." And so, one, it proves that don't stereotype people. You never know who you're talking to. And 2, the rest of the journey and all of the other cities we've been to, and we've been to 50 or so more cities around the country and the world. Dave's just got back from Europe, where he's been to Belgium and Amsterdam and a number of other places, on doing little mini workshops. We've discovered that everybody thinks the rest of their life is going to be interesting. Everybody thinks, once they start thinking like a designer and using our ideas, They realize,
so
wow,
nice.
there's so many things left to do. And it doesn't matter if you're 20 or 80 or anywhere in the middle. The rest of your life really is interesting. And
Yeah.
using the ideas and tools in designing your life kind of help you get some traction and some motion. You know, that bias to action thing. Whenever I go out and I do book stuff and people come in and sign books and I ask them, you know, what was the thing in the book that you found the most useful? Because I'm always curious. There's a lot of different tools in the book, and people invariably will say this idea of reframing, like reframing problems. Like I kept getting stuck, and then I realized if I reframe the problem, I could open up a whole new solution space. That's a big deal. And the idea of a bias to action. I used to just sit around and try to think my way through and never got anywhere.
Yeah.
And when I realized I could, out of the bias to action, I could run a prototype interview. I could go out in the world and talk to people and try stuff. And all of a sudden, I wasn't stuck anymore. So anyway, a long journey. Book's been out over a year now. It's been a fantastic experience, and our editor Vicki Wilson, who's the senior editor at Knopf, has been a fantastic supporter. Knopf is doing a bunch of promotion just recently with Barnes and Noble and others to get the book back to the front of the front of those tables when you walk in the door. So that's exciting. And about in November of last year. Vicki, our editor from Knopf, came to us and said, okay, I want another book. This one's going really well. And we said, oh, okay. We were still having fun with the first book, but if you would like another book, we'd be happy to do that. And we made 3 proposals, just 3 little mini proposals, because we have a great relationship now. We don't have to do the whole giant book proposal thing. And we all agreed at the end that the most interesting book would be a book that really sort of drills into the world of work. So for a working title, it's Designing Your Work Life. And the reason we picked that is that a couple things. One, all of the stuff that we've been hearing back from people about the book, and there's lots of life design tools in the book, of course, but 40, 50, 60 hours of your day, of your week is spent in this world of work, or for some people in the gig economy, multiple places where they work. And if you look at the data, it's pretty sad. Gallup does a poll, I think every 2 years, and they look at what they call employee engagement. How engaged are you in your job? How much does the job, make you feel like you're doing your best work?
But also least favorite data points about America.
It's pretty bad. Right, and also we've been talking to companies, a number of companies who are using Designing Your Life ideas, for their employees. And when they run engagement surveys, it's terrible.
It's about 70% of people are unengaged.
Yeah, nationally,
they 65 to 70% out at work. Yeah.
I get up every Monday morning and go, oh crap, I got to go to work.
Yeah.
And I don't like my job, and it's not turning me on. It's not making me feel creative. And there's a lot of external reasons for that. My boss, my company, the structure of things, the culture where I work. But there's all, we believe that the autonomy is with you, that you're the designer of your life. And so there's ways in which you can make work no matter where you are. The other thing, I was just in Japan doing some stuff with Stanford.
Oh, yeah, that trip looked amazing.
But we also did some book promotion because the book is out in Japan, and we have a wonderful, wonderful group there. The Mori Tuttle agency that represents us there, and a wonderful woman named Manami set up a bunch of interviews. And the very first interview, and we had looked up some statistics, Japan has the lowest level of employee engagement for any industrial country in the world. 90% of employees in Japan say they are actively disengaged at their job. They hate their jobs. And the first question, it was terrible. First question and there's a lot of reasons, a lot of structural reasons for that I won't get into, but the first question I was asked by Forbes Japan, the editor who was interviewing me said, can Designing Your Life help the shachiku workers of Japan? I said, what's a shachiku worker? And he said, well, shachiku is a compound word. It means corporate slave. It's made up from a word for a dumb farm animal and a person with no personality or something. And there's this label, shachiku workers, are people who literally have given up their lives for work. They no longer feel they have any agency or any control, and they simply go to work every day as corporate slaves. Now, Japan has
Oh my
several other
God,
interesting.
that is so
No, it's
depressing
horrible.
to think about.
In fact, it's really quite grim. There's a Japanese word there's a compound word that means work to death, and and suicide from work. And in fact, there is unfortunately a place that there's a last sad thing about Japan. There's in Tokyo, there is a big public garden where people go to hang themselves because they hate their jobs, and the signs for the joggers are essentially don't go in the park until the park service people have gone in and seen if there's any suicides. So that's pretty grim. But all over Europe, all over America, there's a real lack of engagement. And so you think about it, millions of people are going to work and they're not doing their best work because they don't feel engaged. They don't feel like the company wants it, or they don't know how to express it in a way that would be useful.
Yeah, there's no feedback loop.
Yeah, it's no feedback loop. And you can blame work, and you can blame culture, and you can blame your boss and stuff, but your boss is just a person just like you who happened to get promoted, and doesn't know what they're doing either, and working for somebody who got promoted and probably doesn't know what they're doing. I've worked my entire life in the tech industry, and in the tech industry, smart engineers become, vice presidents and directors of things. They're probably the worst managers that I've ever worked for in the world because they're really smart engineers, but maybe not so good on the people stuff.
Highly skilled at execution.
Highly skilled at execution, really low in that social and emotional intelligence. So, no, I've worked with great people too, but it's not a given. And everybody at every level of the organization, you may think, oh, I hate my job because my boss doesn't understand me. But trust me, when I interview your boss, he says, I hate my boss because my boss doesn't understand me, or the company doesn't understand what I'm really good at, or they don't let me do the things, that I know I could do that would be a contribution. So we want to change all that, but we really want to make a big, big impact in the world of work. And there's a ton of great research on this stuff. Our first book and class and everything else is pretty research-based.
It's very research-based.
We teach at Stanford. It is a research
Do
university.
You?
Yeah. You can't just make stuff up. You can't just say this is true. You have to have research. This isn't like politics or the stuff that's going on in NATO right now.
You have to tell the truth.
Yeah, you actually have to tell the truth. And there's a lot of evidence about what makes people thrive at work.
Yeah.
And some really interesting stuff that you can do. We're not big on assessments. We don't say go do a Myers-Briggs or some of these assessments that tell you that you're good at, you should be an astronaut, you should be a farm worker or something. But there's one assessment we like, and it's the one that Gallup does, the Clifton Strengths Finder. And that's a really interesting way of thinking about, if I was going to bring my best self to work, my best talents, my best strengths, what would that be? And how would I design a job that looked like that? And so I've been collecting stories for this book, and this is one of the reasons we're reaching out to the community today, about people who have had the opportunity to maybe go from a job that they didn't like that much to finding a job that was much better. And sometimes finding that job that's much better right where they're working. Our whole method of job finding in the book is, hey, get curious.
Yep.
Figure out what you're interested in. Go have prototype conversations information interviews with people. And to get those prototype conversations, you got to get inside the network of people who are exchanging these jobs informally. And to get inside the network, you got to talk to people, try stuff, get out in the world.
Actually, just really quickly on that note, I want to take a moment to acknowledge everyone who's watching us. And if you have any examples of life design conversations you've had, we'd love to see those in the comments, because most people, as we all know, it's that first step that's really hard. And oftentimes we can actually do the thinking part of the book, I think, better at home. But when we actually have to go talk about it with another human being, it gets a little scary. So for all of you in the comments, hello, Maggie, Nicole, Cynthia, always a pleasure to have you. I know Edgar's up there. He says hello to Bill, along with Gail, and we've got folks. Let us know where you are in the comments. I know we've got some folks from Stanford here. Convenient, they got a shout out. And but we always love hearing where you are. One of the things that's so compelling is how massively global and diverse this community is. So share with us your stories and continue going on.
Well, I just one real comment, quick comment here. Maggie's mentioning, I'm curious about addressing toxic workplaces or workplace toxicity. And yes, we are going to talk about that a little bit. But if you want something that's out there right now that I think is really good, a shout out to our colleague Bob Sutton from Stanford.
Oh yeah.
He wrote a book that was hugely successful called The No Asshole Rule, where he did a bunch of research on toxic workplaces. But he has recently published a book called The Asshole Survival Guide. Excuse me for using his naughty word in the title, but that's the title. And that book covers sort of strategies for dealing with toxic workplaces. So dive into that one because we're going to use a bunch of his research as well. And when we talk about it from a design point of view, how would you design around a toxic workplace? But shout out to Bob for a couple of really fun books. So if the whole process is, geez, I got to get inside this informal network of people who are exchanging jobs that are never listed, but they're the good jobs. Well, gosh, the network you're already in where you work, you've got social capital, you know people. Yeah, maybe you don't know maybe you're in accounting and you want to move to marketing and you don't know the VP of marketing, but it's so much easier to get to him or her or someone in that group from where you are than from outside the company. So I've just been working on a chapter called, Don't Resign, Redesign. And it's all about how do you make the place you're working the place you want to work, because those opportunities are the most available. And when Dave and I go around and we talk, we say, people say, well, what's the secret to your method? And I jokingly, but seriously, I say, the secret to our method is set the bar really low. Talk to people who are available. Talk to people who want to talk to you. Because as Savannah says, it is a little scary to reach out to folks and
even for people like us.
Yeah, to have information conversations about stuff. Now, luckily, when you're having the conversations, as you know from the way we coach it in the book, is you're asking people for their story. You're not asking them for a job or a reference or anything. You're just saying, hey, you've been working in marketing for 15 years. What's it like? How did you get there? What are the things that you did to prepare yourself? And if it's a person affiliated to you, like you work in the same company, you just happen to be in different buildings, it's so much easier to get that conversation than it is to find that person in a whole new company. So we're really interested in collecting people's stories, particularly stories about being disengaged at work, and what do you think caused that? And also stories about, I've been listening to some people talk as I go around, and I've been asking some questions. There's a lot of reasons to work. And it's not just, oh, this job fulfills me, or I love the people I work with, or I get to exercise my creativity. All those things are good. But, it's a pretty modern idea that you're going to get all your meaning and purpose from your job. I don't know about you folks, but my grandparents are, on both sides, are first generation immigrants to this country. And examples of the American dream. My grandfather looked around Germany around 1938, 39 and said, I don't think things are going so well here. This guy we elected looks like a little bit of a crazy person. And so
What's that like?
Yeah, I know. So he moved out of, he did what a lot of immigrants did. They didn't have enough money to move his wife and his brand new baby, my mom, to America. So he worked on a steamship shoveling coal, got to New York, made enough money to go get the rest of his family and bring them over the year later. He took any job he could take, 50 cents a day at the Palo Alto sewerage plant. Literally, he called it the Scheiß House, which is German for shit house, because that's what he was doing. He was shoveling shit.
We're just glamming it up. We're classy AF.
I'm sorry about all the bad words. But I mean, he worked his buns off basically to support his family, and then his kids went to college, the community college here in California, and their kids went to Stanford. But he wasn't thinking his job was going to be the place where he got to exercise creativity. He was just doing the right thing for a good reason. He was doing a hard thing for a good reason. So I'm really curious about people who are in that situation as well. People who are working in a situation where maybe the job isn't exactly what you want, but you're doing it for another reason and a good reason. There's a famous quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, which is one of my favorite philosophers, and I keep trying to stick him in the book, and editors keep taking him out because he's a little dark. But this is a good one. He says, you know, I can deal with almost any how if I have a good why. It's not exactly the translation, but it's close. You know, I can deal with any, I can put up with any situation if I know why I'm doing it. If I have a noble cause for the reason that I'm doing it, then I can, you know, if I need to work at the sewage plant, I can work at the sewage plant because I'm doing the right thing for my family. So I'm really curious about those kinds of stories too, because, you know, the danger with some of these kinds of books, and I read all of them just to see what the other authors are doing, is you present all these hero stories and all these big success stories, and, you know, I hated my job and then I redesigned it, and now I'm an entrepreneur, and then my company went public and now I'm a billionaire. It's like, mostly that's not going to happen. Mostly what's going to happen is people are going to be in jobs, you know, that they have to make better, and they got families and they got mortgages, and you know, they don't have a whole lot of networks that are going to get them out of those situations. And so learning how to really thrive where you are is probably more important than figuring out how to blow the whole thing up and go somewhere else. We'll have a chapter on that too, because it is, you know, sometimes you do have to blow it up. And particularly, you know, back to that comment about toxic workplaces, we would never tell anybody to stay where they are if you're in a toxic work environment, if you're being harassed, you know, or you have, you know, a boss or someone who is being essentially evil. If you're in a place where you're being, you know, where there's prejudice and you're being treated unfairly, women who are being harassed in the workplace, minorities are being harassed in the workplace. If you can, our advice is get the hell out. But in the meantime, you need some strategies for making things work. And we're hoping to have, you know, lots and lots of great stories. When we started the first book, you know, we had our students and we had some stories from some of the folks we taught. But now with a community of, you know, hundreds of thousands of readers and more, we're really hoping to get some really great stories from people, you know, from all parts of the equation. Folks who are in, you know, blue-collar jobs, working hard, making a good living, building stuff. You know, the world needs people who build stuff and make stuff and work in factories and stuff, and then knowledge workers and everybody in between. We want to hear from the whole spectrum.
Speaking of, I've dropped a link to a Google form for those responses here in the chat. I'd love to capture your stories. Your comments here are great too. If you want to think about it and drop in a narrative for us, feel free just to give us a teaser if that's easier. We can schedule time if we think your story's very beneficial for the community to hear. And we really do appreciate all of the anecdotes, everything you guys talk about in the book, and the examples we use in all of the written pieces that have come out afterwards. They're real examples. It's not necessarily someone's real name. You can definitely be anonymous, but they're based in real people. And I think that really adds to the authenticity. I mean, between the research and the stories that weave into that, it's what makes it so compelling. Everyone in the first book is either a real person or a composite of several. And I have one friend, Tim, who is the guy who just loved his job and didn't want to get promoted and decided not to get promoted and stayed there for a long time. Every time we get together or have a party with my friends, Tim has a copy of the book and he pulls it out and says, see this is me right here on page 27. I won't tell you who Tim is, but does he really?
He's very excited about it.
Hilarious. That is so cute.
It is.
Well, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's
and
fun.
He's a contributor. He added value.
Yeah, he adds a lot of value, and he's got a new story, which will probably be in the next book. So, you know, there's a lot going on in the Designing Your Life world. We've got, let me tell you a little bit just on one thing on the academic side. You know, David, my goal is to keep teaching the classes at Stanford, make them better, address more students. But, you know, Stanford is a very small, university. It's only 7,000 undergraduates and 10,000 graduate students, maybe 18,000 kids total in the whole world. And even if we got to all of them, we just don't think that's as big an impact as we want to have. So we started, and we got a lot of requests from other universities. Hey, could we teach a class? And when the book came out, a lot of people have just started using it as a text. And we said, that's fine, but once you come to Stanford, we'll show you how we do it. So we just finished, and a big shout out to the Designing Your Life, the D-Life Lab at Stanford Kathy Davies is our managing director. She's also one of the instructors for the Designing Life for Women class. But that lab is just awesome, and we just completed 2 more transfer workshops. So we have now taught 54 universities and community colleges all over the country, and in Australia, and in I think Germany and Holland and England, how to teach Designing Your Life. And we've given them almost, I don't know, half a terabyte of data of our slides, our research, and everything. And we're giving it away pretty much for free. We charge a little bit of money to cover the donuts. But these schools are all out there prototyping and building their own curriculums. And we've spent 4 days training them on how to do this. And we're super excited by the stuff that's going on in the world. To give you just one example, the community college system in California serves over 400,000 students. It's an enormous, opportunity for people, to move from, and that probably 70%.
That's a lot of human beings.
70% first gen to go to college of any sort. 20% living below the poverty line. Now, these are people, not like my Stanford students, that do not come from any form of privilege typically. Cal State Dominguez Hills, which has a 20 or 30,000 student population of its own. It's kind of, they serve from kind of the beach to South LA to Compton, so some very wealthy parts of the LA beach to the inner city of LA. They've been teaching the class now for 3 years. They started before we even taught them how, and then we taught them how, and now they've secured like a $100,000 grant to expand the class. They've already taught 600 students, which is what I can do in maybe 2 or 3 years at Stanford. They're already doing. And we've trained Harvard, Yale, MIT, Dartmouth, Brown, most of the elites, as well as University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin-Madison, the Arizona State University, which is 70,000 students, I think 70 or 80,000 students, is running a program. So all across higher ed, we're getting to more and more and more juniors and seniors and kids in community colleges, and giving them the tools to help design their lives. And we're seeing that it doesn't have anything to do with privilege or where you went to school or who your parents are. The tools work across the board for everybody. We're getting some great case studies we'll put in the next book about people, from really different backgrounds, using Designing Your Life effectively. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, we announced, Savannah helped us with this a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago or more, the first certification for life coaches, life and career coaches. So that's happening on the 28th. And that seminar is pretty much full. If there's anybody out there in the coaching community who really, 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 wants to go, please, send us an email and we'll see if we can squeeze a few more people in. But there's that coming up. And then for the general world, for just folks who want to come and do a training with me, I'm doing another Designing Your Life intensive on August 18th here in San Francisco in a new venue. It's called the Skywalker Room over in the Presidio, which is a beautiful part of the city.
Very cool.
And it'll be another, all day intensive. We've done about 6 or 8 of these, and I'll be the instructor along with Cynthia Benjamin, who's another one of the DYL instructors and a person who teaches at Stanford. Teaches a really cool class on forecasting and a really interesting class on design for social impact. So if you have interest in social impact, come talk to Cynthia at our intensive. So we've got the intensive on the August 18th. I'm probably going to do another one in October. We're just starting to line up some folks for that, and just continuing to try to increase our community and spread the word. I know Savannah's been doing a lot to build these design teams and book clubs all over the place. Do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had another 400 people join our design team match this time around, which is thrilling, literally ranging from Brazil to New Zealand to Abu Dhabi to Iran, all over the globe. And it's very exciting for us to do that. We match people, in a few different fashions. So some folks do want to meet with people locally in their area. We put you together in that kind of environment. You can also meet online if you're feeling a little less physically social or you're in a remote area. And we also match people based on their design stage in life. So what they're focused on. So whether that's a career transition or transitioning into retirement or frankly identifying what some of their passions are and their strengths are, we put those folks together so we can facilitate constructive conversation. And it's really nice. Depending on where you're tuning into this, we really encourage you to join either our discussion community or our online coaches community. They're both Facebook groups here linked to this page. And check in with us on LinkedIn and elsewhere, because truly one of the most exciting and impactful things I think from the book is the movement that has come as a result. And this second book is possible because we continue to show this enthusiasm and excitement from the readers to the publishers, and it makes it easy to continue to create things like the workbook and a second book, and who knows what lies ahead in the future. So if you haven't had a chance to join our design team match in the past and you're just hearing about this for the first time, you can reach out to me personally and I'll connect you with whoever is closest to you. And you would be surprised. Everybody often thinks there's nobody near them, and there typically is, at least within reason. Yeah. So it's very cool, at least within the same time zone. Some people are in very, very exotic locations, but we genuinely appreciate it. So speaking of timeline and a little bit of that, what's the timeline on the book?
Well, one of the way these things work, we put a proposal in on December 1st, or the proposal that we wrote for the book was accepted on the 1st. And so we have 1 year to complete the manuscript. So technically we would have to have the manuscript in by December 1st. And then that'll probably be published in the fall of 2019. Not so much that it takes the publisher that long to, figure out how to print it and bind it, but the fall turned out to be a fantastic time to intro the first book, and the fall is a great time for these kinds of books, I guess, because partly it's people are coming back from their summers and they're thinking about rebooting careers or doing something new, and it's also only 3 months from what the publishers call the New Year, New You season, which is the sort of January through March season when people make their New Year's resolutions and they buy their diet book and their
so big life changes.
They like to market it in a period that they think is going to make it the most successful. It also gives us time, once the manuscript is done, to get some pre-readers to review it and for some folks to talk about it. And we're going to be trying to work a lot with, we're running into lots of companies, lots of HR and talent management people in pretty forward-thinking companies who are really looking for some new ideas about how to up their employee engagement. And so we'll be working, with a number of companies using the tools in the book to try to validate it before the book launches. So that'll give us enough time to do it. But for me, I know so Stanford will start up again. It's summer break right now. Although I spent the morning filling out Stanford forms for next year. But theoretically, I'm writing right now, and I know for me, if I don't get it done before Stanford starts up again at the end of September, at least my part of the book, it'll be a struggle. So I'm planning on disappearing for most of the time in August to do writing. I don't know if I'd never tell the Paris story. I don't think I have.
No. So just to close on that timing, those of you wanting to contribute a story, please do so if your schedule permits in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'd love to have the stories.
That would be ideal. I love giving Bill information in batches that then he can go make magic with. So please share that.
Yeah, and I'll be writing intensively. I've arranged an apartment.
Ignoring our messages and writing this beautiful new book. So this is the time to ask those questions.
I've arranged for a nice apartment in Washington, D.C. where I'm just going to hide from everybody and just write as fast as I can until I'm done, which parallels the experience I had in the first book. Being a young and romantic, guy who read a lot of Hemingway in college, I always thought someday I'll go to Paris and write a book, thinking maybe it would be more of a piece of fiction. And when we had the deadline for this book, the first book, which was the year before it came out, it came out in September of 2016. So 2015, we had to get it in. And I had a workshop for Stanford over in London at the beginning of the summer. And then I had another workshop for a group in Italy. We were going to Venice to run a 1 week workshop. On
These authors have such a rough life. The travel schedule is just vicious.
And I thought, well, why come home? I'll just go to Paris and write a book. So I spent 2.5 weeks in Paris and wrote the bulk of the book that became Designing Your Life. And it was just a phenomenal experience of writing all day and then wandering the streets of Paris at night.
What beverage food combo was the most museful for you?
Well, breakfast in France is just a croissant and a really great cup of coffee. Yeah. But in the evenings, just finding different cafes. I was in the 6th district and finding cafes all over Paris was exciting. And I also got up in meetup.com and found a bunch of groups that do figure drawing.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm an artist on the side at the moment, moving towards being an artist full time. And I've been taking figure drawing classes now for about 3 years. And I was in Paris. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. There must be people in Paris who do figure drawing. And I got on meetup.com, and there's dozens of places. Went to a little studio up in Montmartre, which is where Picasso and everybody hung out in the old days.
As one does.
And hung out with a bunch of people doing figure drawing. So it was a lot of fun. And it's wine and and a steak frites, right, is the sort of thing you can do in a cafe. There's a website called Hemingway's Walks, and it's got 4 different, from 1 hour to 3 hour walks through the streets of Paris, referencing all of the places Hemingway talked about in A Movable Feast. So, that was my side when I couldn't write anymore. That's what I did.
And forgive me, perhaps I'm missing something in Washington D.C. that I've not seen before, aside from your lovely son. But what brings you to DC for the second immersive versus Paris?
One, that's free. I'm borrowing an apartment from my daughter, and 2, actually, DC is a pretty cool town. In addition to a great restaurant scene and everything else, it's kind of an interesting place to be right now. But 3 of my favorite museums in the world, the Smithsonian, the National Gallery, and the Hirshhorn, are in DC, and so it's going to also be a bit of an art journey as I just spend time.
Fun.
I find that I can write in the morning original stuff, and then in the afternoon, Dave and I sort of send stuff back and forth, and we can edit. I can edit in the afternoon when I'm not in as much of a creative generative brain, but I can kind of make the stuff, I can tune it up and make it better. I typically, I don't know about you as a writer, but if I write 20 pages in the morning, it turns out to be 8 or 9 pages. That's useful by the time I've edited.
That's being generous.
Yeah.
That's
so.
Yeah.
So between writing and editing, and I will visit my son, who happens to be living in DC now, and going to the wonderful galleries on the Mall. I'm sure it'll be a pretty fun time. Not quite Paris, but pretty fun.
Well, I agree with you in terms of a unique cultural place to be right now. You are picking one, and I do think that can be. It can be provoking. I think that can actually be good for the creative flow.
I'm gonna figure out. My son's gonna be a congressional aide in DC, and so he'll know where all the where does everybody go to have a drink and talk about their crazy boss. And on both sides of the aisle, and then we'll just go hang out there and eavesdrop.
Oh, that's going to be fantastic. I want text message recordings from drama gossip behind you sometimes. Real quick question from the audience. Mention of the September intensive that has been rescheduled, correct?
Yeah, there was we had an event in September, but I had to cancel it. I apologize. There was some stuff that came up, some family stuff. So we're rescheduling that for October 20th. So it'll be a little bit, be about a month later from the September 15th date. No one had signed up yet for the date. I know some people had asked about it, but unfortunately we had to move it. It's not live yet on the site, but it will be in about a week. I want to fill up the August date first.
Awesome. They're really fun, and the feedback from these experiences, both the Designing Your Life for Women as well as the intensive and I'm confident we'll have this result with coaching certification is really positive. And the people who attend them seem to stay very connected afterwards. So if you're looking for a way to build that nest, can't recommend it enough. Definitely not shilling, much more looking for the community connection that I know a lot of people are seeking when they read the book and start thinking like a life designer. You can need some new conversational partners sometimes. And I think that's really, it's a great way to do it. And honestly, truly, like step one, if you're feeling shy, is to post into one of our Facebook groups. Everyone's so friendly, has a ton of feedback and advice for very specific problems. So don't feel like you can't ask. So I'm curious, because in our conversation this morning, you know, we both write, and for me at least, I find it easier if I'm writing about something that I've personally gone through in some capacity, even if it's not my exact story that I'm sharing. So, and the book is going to talk about a lot of reframes and adjustments in work life, but you haven't actually been a big pivoter in your career. So start from the beginning, because I think it's really compelling, because I do think we talk a lot about how to find your passion, but it is also nice to acknowledge folks who have found their passion. Yeah. So when did you know what you wanted to be?
Yeah, you know, I have a very unusual story. I'm not even sure that I put myself in the 20% of people who have a passion. Piece of research we quote from Bill Burnett all the time. But I was always a sort of an odd kid who liked to draw and paint and doodle, and liked math and liked science and other things. And so I didn't really have a lot of direction coming out of high school, other than I got into Stanford, and that seemed like a fun place to go. Honestly, I wrote the application the night before it was due, longhand, on the thing, mailed it. Was shocked to have gotten in. Still don't know why they picked me. But I got to Stanford and I thought, well, I don't know, my physics teacher liked me. I like physics, so maybe I'm a physics major. That was the entire, depth of my thinking. Took about a year to figure out that wasn't going to happen. But I did have an amazing physics advisor, Dr. Richard Taylor, who got the Nobel Prize for the quark, who was a really fun
casual name drop there.
Well, it was great. He was.
I think he's passed away. I don't even think I knew that.
He may have passed away by now, but he was cool because he would bring us up to his house and we'd have dinner and he would serve us wine, and we were all underage. And we thought that was pretty cool. That was in the days when professors. When professors could do that. Yeah, you can't do that anymore. So I flamed out of physics, and then I thought, well, I know I like science and I like art, so I'll just declare my own major, science and art. I'll be the first one. And very excitedly went to the School of Engineering to do that. And a wonderful woman named Kay Bradley, who ran the place for everybody, said, "Oh, what do you want to do? Why are you so excited?" I said, I want to declare physics and art as my major. I'm going to do my own major. And she said, "Oh, you don't have to do that. It's called product design. Go down the hall and talk to this guy, Bob McKim." And there is this program at Stanford, which I'm now magically the executive director of, which combines art, design, engineering, physics, anthropology, psychology. It's a very holistic way of thinking about this human-centered design stuff, which we now call design thinking. So I talked to this guy, Bob McKim, who became sort of my mentor and muse, and also mentored David Kelly and all the other great designers that have been out of the program. And he said, take this class called Visual Thinking. If you like it, you're probably a designer. I took the class. It was amazing. It changed my life. I've now taught the class dozens of times. And so I just kind of, accidentally, I think, we have this model of creative competence, and whether you're intuitive, competent, or whether you understand your competencies or you're just intuitively competent. I think I just knew what felt right, and I sort of ended up finding it. I don't remember ever thinking in advance that I had a strategy, but when stuff worked for me, when it felt right, I just sort of kept doing it. So I was really quite lucky. It's the only school in the country. So I was supposed to go to Yale. I got into Yale. I was recruited by the Yale gymnastics team because I was a state champion gymnast in high school. Another fact you probably don't know.
I was just going to let that one.
Looking at me today.
I was just going to let that one slide until
looking at me today. It's hard to imagine that I was once a state champion gymnast. And Yale seemed cool, but it just didn't feel like my people.
Well, either way, we need to do some moves on the next live show.
Yeah.
No, but I understand you hadn't found your tribe yet.
It was nice. It's a beautiful school. I know nothing bad about Yale. I'm sure I would have gone there and had an amazing experience, but there was nothing like this there. So I probably would have ended up a lawyer or
I know.
I don't know. I don't know what I would have done, but I would have found the thing that fit me there, or fit me at Stanford. Yeah, it was this incredibly unique program. So I tracked pretty early, and I found the thing that I loved, and I went from being a really mediocre, engineering and physics student to a really good design student. My advisor, Bob, said, "What do you want to do when you graduate?" I said, "I'd like to work in the toy industry." He called an alumni of ours, a guy named Dale Goldberg, who was the director of toy invention at Kenner Toys in Cincinnati, Ohio. The guys that were doing Star Wars and
the toy guy.
The toy guy. I had one interview with Dale on the phone. I had a job. And ever since then, every job I've had has come from my network of people who I admire and respect, who know where all the cool design jobs are. I went from there and came back, did my master's in design in the program. Then they asked me to teach, and that's how I got started teaching. I've been teaching in the program since 1983, 84. Gosh, that's 30-something years. But then I went off to work, and first job I worked for one of my professors who was starting a startup, which went public and became the biggest public offering. It was the Google of its day. It was a company called Convergent Technologies. And I left there to start my first company with a buddy from that company. We started a toy company called Graybridge, which is a weird name for a toy company, but the toys were called Imagine Action. We built a whole line of preschool toys, raised a bunch of money. We ended up selling the company to Worlds of Wonder, which was the big toy company in the Valley in those days. It was doing Teddy Ruxpin and laser tag and all those things.
That was all the cool games.
We thought it was going to be great.
Yeah.
And it turned out the whole company was a fraud, and 9 months later it went bankrupt. Went public and then went bankrupt.
I remember.
And took my company with it.
I remember the end of that story.
Yeah. And I went from there. I worked with the brother of the guy who started the first company, went to start another company, and we did digital film printers. And then I went to Apple because a buddy of mine, Tom Bentley, who's one of my best favorite managers of all time, said, "Hey, I'm at Apple. We're going to do some new stuff with notebooks and things. You should come." So it's always been the informal network. It's always been moving to things that I thought was interesting, that would challenge the next thing. I was at Apple for 7 years, and actually there'll be a story of quitting well. I realized I had gotten to a certain place at Apple that unless I could move to the next level, I was tired.
Frustrated.
Well, I'd done 11 notebook computers. Fantastic experience.
We're both on Apple laptops right now.
Yeah, I just didn't want to do the 12th one and the 13th one and the 14th one and the 15th one. Didn't get the opportunity that I wanted to move up, so I left and started a consulting company with a buddy of mine, Andy Butler, and ran that for 10 years.
That's where we met.
And that's where Savannah and I met. She was our director of social media marketing and communities at a company called Design to Manufacturing, D2N.
Yeah.
So, it's a story of one thing leads to another, but it's a pretty linear story because every time I was using my design, what I knew about design or designing companies or designing products or designing structures of things that would help people design their products as a consultant. So it's always been in that domain. Now, that kid who liked to draw and paint is still drawing and painting. I have a lovely studio about 4 blocks from my house here in the city, and I've been doubling down, on the art side of my life. So,
Patricia, actually here in the audience, Patricia, thank you for your question. You're so sweet. Where can they see your artwork? I know I see it on your Instagram.
Probably. Well, right now Instagram's probably the only place I'm publishing anything.
Yes. So he is
Viz
Thinker. VIZ. I'll put his handle here in the comments, but Viz Thinker. On
and occasionally, when I post whatever I think is interesting of the stuff that I'm doing, and it's still pretty an evolving thing. I'm not at the place yet where I think I want to be more public with my art, but it's a critical thing. And then the next career for me is definitely as a painter. I think it's interesting because as I'm networking now and building sort of my informal board of advisors in the art world, everybody's saying painting is dead. You got to do multimedia. You got to do installation. You got to do, you want to do the really weird, crazy stuff. And I'm like, you know what? When I go to the Chicago Art Institute and I walk into the room with the 4 Van Goghs, one on each wall, there's 4 self-portraits, and I stand in front of one of those paintings. And Van Gogh self-portraits are about 12 inches by 16 inches. They're not big paintings. They're not big paintings.
This is amazing.
Stand in front of one of those paintings, and I'm just totally absorbed in the experience. It's an aesthetic experience I can't really even describe, but I'm almost always moved to tears. So don't tell me painting is a dead art form. If a piece of canvas with a little bit of color on it can totally transport me, it's not true. And I made a point of fabricating a meeting with my editor in New York when the Michelangelo drawings show.
Yeah, that was real smooth.
I needed to get to New York to see this drawing, so I immediately created a crisis that I had to fly to New York to see my editor. The Michelangelo drawings were another thing where you look at them and it's like, look, it's a piece of paper. He had a piece of chalk, what we would now call a Conti crayon. It's just a piece of compressed charcoal, and he drew these little drawings. None of them very large. One was a big one, but mostly they were about that big because they didn't have pieces of paper in the 1600s bigger than about that big. To make a big drawing, they had to like glue all the paper together.
Yeah. Or have a wall.
You look at those drawings, and then you look at Michelangelo's, just the early sketches where he's trying to work something out, and he's drawn the head on the body in 3 different positions rather than drawing 3 sketches because he's trying to figure out where the guy should look. And you go,
it's amazing.
That kind of, there's something about us. We're visual animals, and when we see things like that for whatever reason can connect to our emotions, it's a transformative experience. I spent 3 or 4 hours in that gallery, but I think I actually spent a lifetime. It was like a century of time to sort of just watch, because you can see if you're an artist and you're looking at someone else's sketches, because they're just kind of scattered. In order to save paper, he would draw something like this, and then he would turn the paper because there'd be a little space left, and he'd draw something over there, and then there was a little blank space over here, so he'd flip it over and he'd draw something there. So you can see that he's just thinking.
Yeah.
But he's thinking through this medium of drawing, of visualizing his thoughts.
So cool.
Yeah.
Would you say you're in flow when you have an experience like that where time transcends a little bit?
Yeah. Completely.
Yeah.
That's why I go to the studio. I mean, it's there's a bumper sticker: the worst day fishing is better than the best day working, or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the worst day in the studio, where I'm standing there with a blank canvas, or I'm standing there with something and it's a completely botched mess.
Yeah. And
I'm frustrated and I don't know what to do, and I'm trying to figure something out visually, and I can't do it because there's still a long way to go.
Is there? Yeah. So
that's still flow.
Yeah.
That's still flow. It's, there's no notion that flow is always pleasant. It's true that it's always transcendent, but you can be transcendently sad. You can be transcendently, deeply, emotionally, troubled, and that's what art can do too. It can take you to your saddest place and your most alone place. So, but that's all flow. It's awful.
I just wanted to highlight that because I think sometimes when I see it in the community, and I even fall victim to this myself sometimes, I think of flow as this positive euphoric action state sometimes where there's, and to a degree, I mean, and that's sometimes the most memorable from a sense because it's a highlight. I feel great.
It's a peak experience.
Yeah, it's a peak experience. And but it is nice to know that you can be passively consuming, looking at art, and be achieving a flow state as well. And the same thing can go. I find I get there walking with the dog just outside on the beach. Yeah. And it's the things that feed you and help you disconnect from the mundane simplicity of it all.
One thing I can look it up, and I won't do it now, maybe we'll post it later. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who wrote the book Experiencing Flow, and who kind of quote discovered this state, or just labeled it, I guess, and measured it, wrote another book called The Quality of Aesthetic Experience, which he talks about the aesthetic experience.
Ooh.
I think that's the title. We'll find the real title.
Yeah.
But it's a book completely about, you know, so what is it like when you hear music and you feel something, or you hear music and you're transcended, or you get sad, or you get happy, or you see a piece of artwork, or you see a performance, you go, you know, the most human thing is to sit in a dark theater and watch people on a stage pretend to be someone they're not, but tell you a story, and you have this visceral experience of feeling the story and being sad when they're sad and happy when they're happy. And you know, and in Les Miserables, like when they, you know, they're on the parapets of the junk that they've done to kind of defend themselves against the bad guys, you feel the euphoria and the heroic sense of them through the songs and the emotion. Like, that's the aesthetic experience. We are humans are so tuned to that experience, and we so readily fall into the, you know, the drama on the stage, or the aesthetics of the drawing, or the dress, or the thing. And you know, there's a wonderful story in our family of you know, one of my nieces was getting married, and all the women went to the big ritual of picking the wedding dress. My daughter's going to get married soon. I don't think I'll be invited to this ritual, but
oh, I thought that was going to get really dark again.
No. And they were all sitting there and Lauren was like, oh, I don't really know what I want, and it doesn't make any difference, and you know, I don't have a real vision for this. And the person who's running this studio for the wedding dress, she says, don't worry, you'll know it when you see it. And they try on a dress and it's fine, and they try on a dress and it's very beautiful, and they try on another dress and it's fine. And I don't know, 8, 10, 12 dresses in, she puts on a dress, she comes out, she looks in the mirror, and she bursts into tears. And the wedding dress lady says, that's the one. Mm-hmm. You just know it. Because we're tuned for these experiences. And, you know, we talk about you should have flow at work, but you should certainly have flow in your life. And whatever it is that brings you to that place of that experience, you gotta be, first you gotta discern it. You gotta know that it's mm-hmm. true for you. And then you have to know kind of what causes it. And sometimes you can't force it. You have to sort of put yourself around stuff. I mean, I walk through a lot of museums and I look at a lot of art and go, no, guy can't draw. This is a piece of junk. I don't get it. You know, and I know enough about art to know what the critics say and then say, I just totally disagree. But every once in a while, I'll stop in front of something an artist I've never heard of. And it'd be
that's always my favorite.
You know, yeah. Just like, oh my God, what is that? You know, how did she do that?
And what was going on in their head? You know, it's such a cultural thing. We're in a cool art time right now. The world is spinning, and
there's, you know, art everywhere, from the Burning Man, you know, on the playa, to, you know, the fine art, to art that just gets posted because some kid is in his room with a guitar and he's got a version, you know, of White Rabbit that he wants the world to see, and it turns out to be transcendent.
Yeah, it's awesome.
For those of you too young to know,
right? Google that. Just
Google White Rabbit.
Please culture yourself
Jefferson Airplane
with this. You can thank us in the next live broadcast. So you described a path there that does have a lot of same sort of themes. Like when I think of a mind map or an Odyssey plan you would have made, there might have been variation, but I think a lot of those keywords would have held through.
Oh, absolutely.
A very significant chunk of your career path. That said, is there any skill or aspect of that you don't use at all, a side of you that has kind of completely, maybe naturally morphed out, that was either a strength you thought you had or a thing you thought you were supposed to like? I think people are told what to like a lot growing up. Anything that was abandoned, as another way to reframe it.
You know, early in my career, everybody said, well, you know, being a designer, it's all about doing new stuff all the time. And I had this amazing job at Kenner, my very first job, with a fantastic set of managers. Dale Goldberg, I mentioned. There's a guy named Howard Bollinger who ran the group, and he was probably the best guy I ever worked for. And Howard was, you know, a consummate executive at a big toy company, running the Star Wars license, dealing directly with George Lucas. He was a big shot. But you could often find Howard in his corner office in the Kroger building, on the floor, in a nice three-piece, you know, suit, but on the floor, playing with trucks and going vroom, 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 and they're going, hey, why don't we make trucks with sounds in them? I mean, he was a total child. So I love that job, but after a while I got bored because it was just like we just invented stuff and then we handed it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And so the next job, I really wanted to do more details, and I essentially became a manufacturing engineer working on a manufacturing line, trying to figure out why we build 100 things and one wouldn't work, and what was the problem with that one. And so I got way into statistics and analysis, and those of you in the manufacturing world, fishbone diagrams and Six Sigma and all that stuff. And for a long time, I thought that was really, really interesting. And now I don't do any of that. I mean, it's, that side of sort of design validation, I still think is interesting. And I encourage my students to spend some time there because it gives you this, what we used to call, teach them the scar tissue to be a better designer.
I was going to say, it's important to understand, even on the marketing side.
Yeah, if you've seen how what you do fails to work,
and hurts everyone around,
and hurts everybody other. I designed one little piece of sheet metal thing once and went out to the production line, and a very lovely woman who was working there came up with Band-Aids on all of her fingers, and she said, "I think there's a problem with your part, Mr. Burnett." It was just cutting people. No, it's so terrible. So I used to find I do enjoy the sort of math and science of design, but I don't find myself spending much time with that anymore at all. But I'm also in at the level where that doesn't really come up. But boy, if a designer presents a solution to me and shows me some bad statistics, they're going to get roasted. Because you need to know how to do that stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's very fun.
There's very little statistical analysis in painting. Although if there's anybody out there who's really good, at writing web scraping software and data analysis, I have a theory. As I walk through museums, I notice that the paintings that are typically any modern paintings, not paintings from before the turn of the 18th century, paintings that are very famous are large.
Yes.
And I think there's a statistical correlation between large subject matter and composition. And I'd love to do I'd love to go through all the museums in the world and just get a data set of what is the size of all these paintings, and then to do an image analysis on the paintings to understand what is the composition, not so that AI can create paintings, but because I think there is something about the way humans process visual information. I was going to say what we
like. Yeah, there could be a lot to be learned from that.
When I was young, when I was a student at Stanford, I got to take a class from a guy named Leo Holyoke in photography, and Leo had been a good friend of Ansel Adams. And he had lots of stories about hiking in Yosemite with Ansel and doing stuff with Ansel, and he had lots of photographs of Ansel Adams. And we had at Stanford, we did have a nice gallery, and we had a show once of Ansel Adams photography, and it's stunning.
It is.
But in those days, even though he worked with very large format photography, the biggest picture he could print
get very big.
was I've got an Ansel Adams.
Oh yeah. How convenient.
Thing over there, a poster. But that's, maybe that's 16 by 20 or something. And I was walking through San Francisco, just had a big Walker Evans exhibit, and famous photographer, and hundreds of photos at the San Francisco MoMA. And I was noticing, because they're all 8x10s, that an 8x10 photo. I mean, now we live in the world of digital photography, and you can make a picture the size of IMAX, right?
Yeah.
The digital, and I spent a bunch of time in high definition television and in imagery design, images on film design. So I know a lot about the sort of psychographics of human sight and why we're attracted to these high definition images. And I just thought the Walker, if I'd seen that Walker Evans show 20 years ago, I would have thought, wow, these are stunning.
Right.
And I walked through it, and I was kind of like, these are nice, but they're so small. So anyway, anybody want to do some data analysis with me? this completely side note. It has nothing to do with our conversation. I apologize.
I do think that's interesting, though. I mean, that's we both like testing things on people and learning about their behaviors. It's one of the things we definitely have in common.
Yeah, and it's the fundamental sort of designer point of view. It's like, well, let's go run.
What happens if we do this?
Let's go run an experiment and see what
people do with this information. That's why we're here with you live. We actually get a lot of views here over time, and we love doing the live shows. It's very fun for us. So that works out. Well, there's one final question. I know we're a little over our hour, but I think it's lovely, and I've watched you all continue to hang out. And so I think we have a little bit of an art community here, which I love. We both appreciate the arts. Total birdwalk, but question from the audience. Do you supervise PhD students?
No, I do not.
And neither you or Dave do, correct? This question comes up.
Well, David's a little different. So I don't think I think I would be allowed to, but only because I've been around a long time. Typically, to advise a PhD student, you have to have a PhD, which I do not have. And you have to be a member of what's called the academic council. You have to be a tenured track professor. I'm an adjunct professor. I will never be tenured, which is fine with me because I don't want to go through any of that stuff anyway. So typically, when you form a dissertation committee for your PhD, there will be the PI, the principal investigator. That's the lab you work in. You work for this person's lab. And then you will form a committee of other tenured professors who will evaluate your work and coach you. So I don't get involved in that. David Kelly, who also does not have a PhD, but is a member of the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Engineering, and is the Misha Block Design Award winner.
That's right.
He's been given millions of accolades by people all over the world. Does sometimes sit on these committees as a sort of design friendly. But no, I do not, because I don't know that I would be an appropriate committee member. Plus, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, my first response was just based on your schedule.
Yeah, I spent all my time. I spent all my time teaching when I'm not, doing design your life stuff.
Yeah, it's a good balance. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us, Bill. I think it's super fun for everyone to know that you went from gymnast to artist, and perhaps some of the
with a little
physiology of that, had something to do with your ability to express the human form.
I'll tell you, kinesthetic intelligence, the intelligence of just kind of being comfortable and knowing where your body is in space. Gymnasts are the best at it. I mean, if you think about someone who can, jump up in the air, do a double backflip with two rotations, two spins. So a double full, they would call it, or double full. When I was a gymnast, people were just, because they didn't have the new springy mats and things, so they were just starting to do double back somersaults on floor exercise. You could do it on trampolines and stuff, but nobody was
just given it
strong enough to do it. But then they invented these new mats and things, since people started doing that. And now regularly you'll see a person doing two flips with two spins in it. And if you think about what does it take for you to know where you are in space, so that in the 1.6 seconds that it takes to complete that thing and you're 8 feet off the ground, you know how to get your feet down and stick the landing. It's amazing. I was never at that level. I was a specialist in pommel horse, but that's a whole different kind of kinesthetics of moving your body in a plane, bouncing on your hands. It's quite weird. I'm not sure why I was able to do
it. There's more to this story. Maybe someday, if enough folks chime in the comments, we'll share a little more about Bill's gymnastic history on the blog.
My one deep regret is that I have no films of myself.
Oh, this is literally what I was just
my parents
ask.
Never took videos.
I was just going to ask.
I've never been able to locate any films from any of the state meets or anything. I'm sure there must have been films.
Oh man.
I think I wouldn't even recognize myself.
Oh wow! Well, that was awesome, and I think it's cool. We do share a lot of stories of lives well designed, and we'll be sharing a lot more in the coming year and this time leading up to this new book, including some of the stories hopefully coming from you listening today, which is absolutely fantastic. I'll share my story at some point because it's basically the opposite of Bill. I did not come through the beautiful channel of a brilliant university with a network. But I can say that Bill was the last job I got from a cold resume. So you were the last person to employ me based on something I sent in without a network. Thanks to photoshopping my head on a ninja body.
It was a pretty clever resume.
And we'll get there. Yeah. And but that said, we learn so much from each other when we share these stories. And I think it's really exciting. So keep sharing. Do fill out this Google form if you have very work-specific content or anything else. We're always looking for your testimonials and narratives. The community grows and continues to gain momentum thanks to all of you. Bill, thank you for taking the time out of your busy summer writing schedule to join us and to be here. And thank you to everyone in the audience, both live with us now and in the future. We value you. We thank you. Savannah Peterson, your very proud community manager, signing off. We'll see you next month.